Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Daniel Dubois retains the IBF title after a one-sided beatdown of Anthony Joshua. And it wasn't the Hagler Hearns that the commentary was making up post-fight. This was all Daniel Dubois all the time. Multiple knockdowns in this fight, and it really started with his huge overhand right at the end of round one, which put Joshua down and really sort of set the tone for the rest of the fight. So what we'll do, we'll briefly talk about some of the action, a little bit of controversial refereeing from Marcus McDonnell as well. I think he kind of did a couple of things that, a little sketchy, and then we'll talk about Daniel Dubois, his comments after the fight. Also, Anthony Joshua, a classy statement after the fight. None of the craziness we've seen back in after his most recent loss against Alexander Usyk in the second fight that they had. And then the what next, because there is a rematch clause, and Eddie Hearn was pretty emphatic about what he thinks is going to happen. So first, this fight, it always appeared that these guys were going to throw some big leather in this fight. It depended what was Joshua going to do, how was he going to fight. And when I saw him weigh in at 252 pounds, I thought maybe he's not going to be as light and agile on his feet. And I don't think he was. He wasn't as fleet of foot. He was standing and trading a bit more with Dubois, trying to get his own away. But he was coming off second best. Daniel Dubois was hitting him with hard jabs. He was lining up the right hand. And by the end of that first round, he found the target. And Joshua was really on shaky legs at that point. And pretty much after that, Daniel Dubois was just waiting for Joshua to make mistakes. And many of you probably would have seen Joshua had his hands quite low. So Dubois, when Joshua was looking to jab or, throw a shot, he was punching with him and he was finding the target. And that stiff jab, which is almost like a power shot of its own, it was also creating some havoc. Daniel Dubois was causing Joshua to react on a lot of shots. And by round three, even though Daniel Dubois had expended a lot of energy, he was really trying to put it on Anthony Joshua. His mouth was open, he was breathing hard, he was having all the success, and Joshua was doing his best to survive. He really was on wobbly legs, and it was round three when he was down again. And this was a somewhat controversial moment, I think, that the referee caused. You had Daniel Dubois catching Joshua with a big left hook. Joshua literally on skates. It really was quite interesting seeing him. Both legs were, doing a funny dance on the way back to the ropes. But Joshua ends up touching down with his gloves. The referee inextricably misses this, and you had a count starting to come in from ringside, which Marcus McDonnell waved off. So Daniel Dubois just kept going to town, putting a beating on Joshua as he was effectively almost falling through the ropes. So there was a count, Joshua beats it, and this was right at the end of the round, so Joshua escapes. And round four, some more controversy because there was a knockdown, and it almost appeared like it was a slip, but you had a case, Dubois straight back on Joshua, and at this point, he's taking a lot of punishment. He goes down, and Marcus McDonnell is gesturing like the fight is waved off, but what he was actually doing was waving off the knockdown. He had judged it to be a slip. So, they were very confusing in the moment. I had to go back and watch it after the fight because I, like the commentators, probably many of you at home, thought that this was all over. And I had a bit of a sinking feeling thinking, is this going to be a moment that will sort of bail out Joshua? Is he going to be able to, with Dubois putting in so much effort, coming forward, trying to stop him, is Dubois going to start to gas and Joshua start to get back into the fight, maybe do something? But it wasn't to be. You did have a case in round five where Joshua actually rocks Daniel Dubois. And I thought, oh no, here we go. And it was a huge shot. Daniel Dubois reacts, and Frank Warren spoke about it after the fight. He thought Dubois was in trouble at that point. Joshua follows up with a couple of right hands that find the target. Dubois doesn't seem too phased. He's still backing up to the ropes. But then he starts trading with Joshua. And this is where the fight ends, because a huge right hand, he's trading with Joshua, throwing at the same time, lands right on the button on the chin, and Joshua goes down like a sack of potatoes off a cliff. And you knew he wasn't getting up from that one. Probably the referee didn't need to start the count, but he did. He gave Joshua every opportunity, and when it became clear he was never getting up, it was waved off. So Daniel Dubois all the time in this one, retains the IBF title. And I think for many, they would say that Daniel Dubois really is a champion now, because he was elevated to the title from the interim title belt, and it was one of these situations with the main belt being dropped by Alexander Usyk, I should say, that people felt Dubois wasn't a true champion. I think he really has earned that title now. Biggest win of his career, Daniel Dubois has arrived. This was a fight at Wembley in front of 96,000 people, and you had a situation where Daniel Dubois, for not the first time he's been in a big fight, but this was the biggest stage in the sport. 96,000 people, biggest fight at that stadium ever, and one of the, obviously biggest heavyweight fights in recent years, certainly a record in terms of attendance in the UK at Wembley. Daniel Dubois delivered. Coming out to the ring, he looked ready. He looked ready to go. The moment didn't overawe him. And I was thinking on the ring walk, he looked dialed in and ready to go. And he came out and he performed. Huge win for him, and I'm sure his stock goes right up, because Anthony Joshua, obviously a huge name in the sport, huge with casuals, etc. Daniel Dubois has taken some of that shine. He dominated Joshua in this one. Wasn't the Hagler Hearns that they were trying to make out to be after the fight. Joshua showed a lot of heart and determination, but like I said in my preview video just a couple of days before this fight, where I raised the question, is Daniel Dubois being overlooked? It seemed that the betting odds were way too wide and his power was not being respected and not being taken into account for this fight. I said that Daniel Dubois, if he hit Joshua, it's likely that Joshua was going to stay hit. And so it was. The shots that he was landing, quality shots, and he proved that he is one of the best heavyweights in the world, certainly well ensconced now in the top 5 of the division. And the heavyweight division is ever changing, so some of these names plug in and get taken out as the fights occur. So this was a huge night in the career of Daniel Dubois, and he's looking at potential huge fights with the likes of Alexander Usyk. He was asked after the fight, obviously, who do you want to fight? And he said anyone. He wants to fight Usyk. He talked about his redemption story. And actually, I'll just get to his quotes. So the first thing that he said, the first question he was asked, just like in Gladiator with Russell Crowe, he said, "Are you not entertained?" And that was a perfect moment to sort of say that. And huge cheer. And he said it's been a long journey. He's grateful to be in this position. I'm a gladiator. I'm a warrior to the end. And he's not going to stop. And he said, this is my redemption story. And I think we can say, based on that performance and what he did to what was a consensus top, 4 heavyweight and Anthony Joshua, people have varying degrees about where they put him. He is on this redemption arc. And I think we can have some confidence that he's going to be in some huge fights, have more big nights, and get some wins. Sometimes style matchups may not necessarily be in his favor, like the Usyk one, but if they had a rematch, that's a really interesting rematch. So I was wondering, well, what's happening with Joshua? And Joshua actually said that he rolled the dice with this fight, that he came up short, and he actually said that line a couple of times. And he said, when he was asked if he's going to continue fighting on, we will keep rolling the dice. And I don't think there's any expectation we should have that he should quit, given the money that the Saudis are pouring into the sport and the opportunities that you can still get. Even if he doesn't rematch Daniel Dubois, and we'll come to that in a moment, there's plenty of other big fights out there for him that the Saudis could make. It's not necessarily snakes and ladders in terms of you have to rebuild for 2, 3, 4 fights. You can go straight back into a big fight. We saw that with Deontay Wilder. He lost to Joseph Parker and then is tossed in against Zhang Zhilei. Joshua, if it's not Daniel Dubois next, could very well still be in a huge fight. So I don't think the questions of should he retire and all that sort of stuff, right now, there's no need. There's no 2-year build-up, rebuild that he needs to have. But in terms of Eddie Hearn, he said that Joshua, he said, I'm sure he will exercise the rematch clause. And I wasn't sure that there was a rematch clause given some of what we've seen with Riyadh's season, but I guess Joshua, and while Dubois held the title, Joshua was clearly the promotional A-side. He came in second, in the ring walks, all that sort of stuff. He was treated as the star. So he's got this rematch in his pocket, which is clearly negotiated. Even though Deontay Wilder had a rematch and Zhang Jilei had a rematch with Joseph Parker, for example, these were not exercised. So potentially, maybe he won't exercise it given the beatdown that he's just taken against Daniel Dubois. With the Saudis having so much sway, depending on what they want, could see all these fighters go in different directions, not necessarily face each other next. Maybe down the line, who knows? But the longer or the more that they're in the sport, there's going to be money flowing and opportunities to have big fights and fresh fights as well. But huge effort from Daniel Dubois, as they always say in Formula One, mega. So mega performance by Daniel Dubois. It was really a one-sided beatdown. I thought Joshua was going to be a lot more defensively responsible than that, move more, be a bit more agile and fleet of foot, but I don't think the 252.5 pounds that he carried in there did him any favours in the end. I think, a Joshua closer to 240 could have boxed and moved at a much higher level, as we've seen in the past. I think obviously he came to bang and he came off second best against Daniel Dubois, who was focused, who really had, Joshua in his sights, and he landed the punches that did the damage. Daniel Dubois, the IBF champion, and his star really is born. I think ahead of this, Daniel Dubois, obviously known by boxing fans and maybe some casuals, but he's announced himself. And good job for Daniel Dubois. Congratulations to the 27-year-old, who really is on a pretty tremendous redemption arc. Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.